Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. Our tradition is to go around and introduce ourselves before we hear from our speaker. My name's Tom.
Francesco.
I'm Tim.
I'm Juan.
My name is Michael.
Evan.
And Jack.
Mark. Douglas.
I'm River.
Jose.
David.
Don.
Roy.
Jay.
My name is Joe.
I'm Jim.
My name is Al.
I'm Oswaldo. Peter.
My name is David.
I'm Bill.
Wonderful. Our speaker today is David Lewis. David has been following the Dharma path for over 40 years and has a degree in comparative religious studies. He attended his first retreat in the Tibetan Shambhala tradition at the age of 17, has been practicing Vipassana meditation since moving to San Francisco 25 years ago. He's a longtime member of the Gay Buddhist Fellowship and he also leads a weekly sitting group for seniors every Friday morning. David's a graduate of Spirit Rock Meditation Center's dedicated practitioners program and has been on the teaching team for Spirit Rock retreats. David, and this is the first of how many? A series of how many?
3.
First of a series of 3. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. I was just really appreciating this room in this sangha when I came in this morning. Actually, this is an aside, as I'm just really full of appreciation this morning. I think it came to me, it occurred to me when it started raining and when I was at home, and I just felt, all of a sudden I noticed I was just blissfully happy. It's raining. And then I thought about, all the nice things that have happened in the last couple of days. That a friend of mine came down to go to a retreat at Spirit Rock, and I picked him up there. He came a day early to hang out with me. So I got to hang out with a friend that lives in a different city. So. And then I took him to the farmer's market, and they had morel mushrooms, which are a big deal for me. So I was kind of raised with them, and they're seasonal, and you only get them for like a month this time of the year. Wow. And there's just one little thing after another. I'm so grateful. And then it rained this morning. And I walked into this room, and it's such a beautiful place, such a beautiful Buddha Rupa. A room like this brings up feelings of transcendence for us. Don't you notice that you just walk in and your mind just automatically gets quiet? And then we get to meditate, and that just reinforces that. But this feeling of transcendence is something I've been reflecting on lately. It's such a beautiful thing. Transcendence is simply something that takes us out of our ordinary reality, maybe heightens our reality. So it could just be you're doing dishes and hands are all soapy, and your mind has gotten kind of quiet, and you look out the window and a hummingbird lands on the pear tree outside your kitchen window, and everything just stops. It's just a moment of transcendence out of nowhere, or standing by the ocean, taking a hike someplace. It can happen anytime. It doesn't have to be in a spiritual space like this, but spiritual spaces are designed to instill that feeling of transcendence. But they can happen under any circumstances, and it doesn't require a space. It doesn't require any special conditions. It's what brings transcendence is more the inclination of your mind. It's what your mind's doing. So when you're doing dishes and you look out the window, if your mind happens to be quiet, and if you happen to be pretty much grounded in the present moment, just doing what you're doing and not thinking about a dozen other things, a hummingbird can be a moment of transcendence. And it's not the hummingbird, it's your mind. It's the inclination of the mind. The Buddha said famously that whatever thoughts are pondered upon and frequently considered, to that the mind inclines. In other words, you are what you think. You are what you practice. So there are a lot of ways to be spiritual. Many, many different ways to be spiritual. Many, many different traditions, obviously. But even within any given tradition, including Buddhism, you can be spiritual by practicing meditation, prayer, devotional practice, good deeds, doing good deeds, or making offerings, dana. In Southeast Asia, a lot of very ordinary people, their main practice is offering dana to the monks in the monasteries. That's their spiritual practice. So there are a lot of ways to be spiritual. And one of them in the Buddhist tradition that I haven't talked about very much are the paramis, or the parami, or the paramitas. And those are all different versions of the same word, and it's called parami in the Buddha's language, in Pali, which is the spoken language of the Buddha's time. Paramita is the Sanskrit word. It's the same thing. The paramitas, or the paramis, are known as the 10 perfections. And they're ways that you can incline your mind, and ways that you can apply to spiritual life, to your everyday life. So I'm not talking about meditation today. You all know that I really love to talk about meditation. It's my primary practice. But the paramis, or the paramitas, are something that you can apply in your ordinary life. The paramis, as a list, and you know these little series of talks that I give are usually about this list or that list. I pick a list and talk about it. Buddhism's kind of famous for its lists, but that's how we remember it, what we want to incline our minds toward. But this list is not original to the Buddha. There's no place in the suttas that I'm aware of where the Buddha actually said these are the 10 perfections you should try to apply to your life. This list came a little bit later, after the Buddha's time, but it's grounded in the Buddha's teachings and what the people, the monks and the monastic community that developed the suttas and the teachings that got passed down. One of the things they noticed is that when the Buddha spoke, especially to lay people, to non-monastic groups, when he spoke to just regular folks passing through a village, the paramis are what he spoke about. The first thing that the Buddha addressed. So all 10 of these perfections, and I'll tell you what they are in a minute, come up all the time, regularly. Very important in the Buddha's teachings. They just never got put into the list until after the Buddha's time. So, the paramis are, and there are 10, generosity, morality, renunciation, energy, patience, truthfulness, resolve, kindness, and equanimity. So these are all practices or ideals that we can take into our normal everyday life, and you already do. So I'm not introducing anything that's foreign to you. And I mean that in a couple of different ways. For one thing, you probably recognized already that these are fairly universal in different religious traditions. So if you were raised Christian or Jewish or Muslim, paramis are fairly universal, especially kindness, virtue, but even generosity and renunciation. Another way to look at the paramis, to think about the paramis, is that they are ways that we can take our spiritual practice into our daily lives to address those areas where our mind generates stress. So if you want to alleviate stress in your life, the paramis are a good way to start. So I'll give you an example of how this works. It's going to be familiar to everybody. Yesterday, I told you I had a friend visiting, and I drove him out to Spirit Rock, which is in West Marin, and we left late Saturday morning, and it was the traffic was backed up all the way across the Golden Gate Bridge to south of, coming from the airport to south of Golden Gate Park. The traffic was a crawl. It was a mess. And my friend that I was spending time with is a Buddhist practitioner, and he said, "What are you talking about tomorrow?" And I said, "The paramis." And so we're crawling along in traffic, and I'm kind of talking about the paramis with him, and he said, we're stuck here in traffic, and that could be, for most people that are driving along here, honking their horns is a source of worry and frustration and irritation. I mean, you can just feel it in the traffic, worry and frustration and irritation. Or you could just be driving along with your friends, same traffic, same car, same conditions, and you can be practicing patience and renunciation and kindness. It's just two different responses to the same circumstances. So we have a choice when we're stuck in traffic or any other stressful situation in our lives. We have a choice about how we're going to respond to that. And the paramis are a great way to frame our response, whether we're kind of doing it automatically and without thinking, or whether we're making careful choices based on discernment and consideration. But the question is what's going to alleviate stress most effectively? If I don't want to be having a stressful morning, I'm going to have to let go of the frustration and the irritation and just realize that traffic's slow and we're going to get there an hour late. So I mentioned that the paramis are universal to all religious traditions that I know about. Today I'm just going to talk about the first three, and then we'll split them up. And we come back once a month and we talk about another handful of the paramis. But it's interesting that today I'm going to be talking about the first three, which are generosity, virtue, and renunciation. And sometimes those three are the most difficult ones for us Westerners, partly because of the religious tradition that many of us share, and partly because of the materialistic capitalist culture that we live in that encourages us to want more. But in terms of the religious tradition, it's really interesting that today's Easter, and it's the end of Lent. We just went through the Lenten period. Those of you that were raised Christian, that Lent doesn't get talked about too much, I think, even in Christian communities anymore. But it is a period of prayer, penance, repentance of sins, almsgiving, or dana, atonement, self-denial, or renunciation. So those are the Christian version of the first three paramis. And I didn't even know whether I ought to mention Lent this morning, because it brings up the idea that, well, renunciation is giving up something you like, or giving up something pleasurable, or repentance is subjugating yourself for having been bad, being sorry for your sins. But I don't think those kinds of judgmental, kind of heavy-handed responses have probably always been universal in the Christian culture. And the fact that they match the Paramitas means they might have been softer, and they might have meant something different. For instance, in Jesus' time. Jesus, the other thing, by the way, that Lent commemorates is the time that Jesus went into the wilderness for 40 days and meditated on his own, and was confronted with temptations by the devil. And the Buddha did exactly the same thing, and was confronted by temptations from Mara, which you can either look at as a historical event, or metaphorically, that what happens to us every time we get quiet and meditate is we're confronted by the demons of our own judgments and memories and wants and desires and ill will, or Mara, or the devil. So generosity, virtue or morality, and renunciation are very beautiful characteristics in Buddhism, and slightly different things than the way you might interpret them from having been raised Christian or Jewish or Muslim. The Buddha said a number of times, in fact, that if you don't have virtue, if you don't have morality in your life, if you don't live a fairly good, fairly pure life, it's going to be very difficult to meditate. So don't even bother trying to learn, because you'll just be haunted by remorse. So the Buddha advised people to clean up their act first before meditating. But the collective lesson of the first three parami is that in order to undo the stress in our minds, we have to move towards a more selfless and less egocentric way of being in the world. So that's the one thing that unifies generosity, virtue, and renunciation. So I want to start by talking about, and I'm not taking them in order, I want to start by talking about morality or virtue. Morality, like dana, like generosity, is based on a sense of empathy, except with morality, it's not a question of making an offering, but of making non-harming a way of life. So this idea of non-harming, we all know, we've heard about it many times here at ABF from different speakers. Non-harming is one of the central aspects of Buddhism, and certainly the central meaning of virtue. We practice non-harming, or try to practice non-harming, in all different kinds of ways. So the fundamental principle in sila is the Pali word for non-harming, for morality, is the golden rule. Just like in all other traditions, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's a fundamental respect for other beings. Morality is for my welfare, for the welfare of others, and it leads to peace and harmony in relationships, society, and the world. It's all about relationship and how we relate to each other, and how our nations relate to each other, and our communities relate to each other. The Buddha offered 5 precepts that he advised as a practice for lay people. Monks had a great many more precepts. And I think you've all probably heard about the 5 precepts. And if you come on the GBF retreat, we actually subscribe to them during the time of the retreat. But the Buddha said we should be subscribing to them in our everyday lives. And they are, This is how to be in the world. I undertake a practice of refraining from intentionally killing. I undertake a practice of refraining from taking what is not freely offered or from stealing. I undertake a practice of refraining from sexual misconduct. Fourth is, I undertake a practice of refraining from harmful speech. Fifth is, I undertake a practice of refraining from intoxicants that cloud my mind. Now, I could give a whole talk, and would actually like to someday, but I could give a whole talk just on the precepts. But we don't have that much time today. So the one thing I want to say about the precepts is that we should place a lot of emphasis on the part when these are chanted or spoken, on the part that says, I undertake the practice of refraining. The precepts are all practice. They're not commandments. They're not the 5 commandments of the Buddha. They're a practice, and nobody does them perfectly. So, for instance, every one of them is on a scale of very coarse practice to very refined practice. And you could start out, for instance, with the first one. I undertake the practice of refraining from intentionally killing. How does that apply to my life? I could start out by saying, okay, I'm going to make a commitment and an effort not to kill another human being in my lifetime. That's a fairly coarse practice, and I'll probably be able to accomplish it. But then there's a whole range of scale behind that of, well, I might choose to refrain from killing other animals. Or even I might choose to be a vegetarian and not allow other people to kill animals on my behalf. Or I might get even more refined, and I might make a huge effort not to step on ants and not to swat mosquitoes. So there's a whole range of refraining from killing that can be practiced. Any of it and all of it is appropriate. So you don't have to be a vegetarian to be a Buddhist. The Buddha wasn't a vegetarian. Probably was mostly, but he ate meat. And you don't have to be a perfect person to practice the precepts. Morality is more about your frame of mind and your attention than having perfect actions, and it's certainly not about having a perfectly clean and pure mind. Morality invites us to consider more carefully what is harmful and to exercise discrimination, make choices. It's about metta, it's about goodwill. This all comes from goodwill and loving ourselves. As in the case of generosity, which I'll talk about in a minute, we are the ultimate beneficiaries of our own skillful actions. So again, in Buddhism, over and over again, it's like we practice morality not just in order to be kind to other people, but in order to be kind to ourselves. And we, ourselves, are the ultimate beneficiary. If we're harmful to other beings, we'll probably suffer ourselves. So when we sit in meditation, one of the things that sometimes we notice is that unpleasant stuff comes up. We notice we might have memories that we've been suppressing. We might start feeling bad about something we said to somebody the other day, and we're feeling guilty about it. We might be remembering a James Bond movie that we saw last night where we wanted to kill the bad guy just as much as James Bond did. You know, we can have murderous impulses in our minds. That doesn't make us bad people. And one of the great things about practicing virtue and morality is that we can make the distinction between acting out on the stuff that's in our mind and having it be in our mind. We can become much more tolerant and kind to ourselves about, Yes, when I watch an action movie, I have murderous impulses, but that doesn't make me an evil human being. So morality is not so much about purity of mind as being careful in action, which, as you know, is karma. Action is karma. The second of the paramis that I want to talk about this morning is renunciation. And this could be a big button pusher for Westerners. But I would say that the whole of Buddhist practice is based on renunciation. So renunciation isn't about subjugating yourself. It isn't about giving up that which you love. I came up with 3 different definitions. I didn't invent these. Well, I invented one of them, but 2 of them were other people's definitions. 3 different definitions for renunciation, all of which I think are worth contemplating. First is, renunciation is letting go of the pull towards a sense object. So that's what we do when we meditate. Meditation is a practice for renunciation. You decide, okay, I'm going to come in this room, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to close my eyes, I'm renouncing seeing, and I'm not going to pay attention to sounds, bodily sensations, or even, to the best of my ability, thoughts. You're renouncing, chasing the pull of sense objects. So if somebody comes in, opens the door and comes into the room and you're meditating, chances are you'll make the choice not to open up your eyes and look and see who it is. Mm-hmm. That's a renunciation. It's like I'm choosing not to follow that sense desire. If you have a sound, you don't necessarily check out, have to think about what it is. And if you have a thought, you don't necessarily have to feed it. Or if you have a feeling, you don't have to feed it. I just saw a quote from a neuroscientist that said that the average feeling, emotion, that any of us have lasts about 1.5 minutes. If it lasts any longer than that, it's because we're feeding it. Everything else is thoughts. So, say I have a moment of loneliness or sadness. That'll pass in about 1.5 minutes or less. Unless I start feeding it, thinking, well, why am I lonely? I'm lonely because, I don't have a partner, and it seems like I don't have enough friends, and I live alone, and then it could last for 2 or 3 days, loneliness. But if I just leave it, let it be a moment of loneliness, it's about 1 minute. The second definition of renunciation that I like is that it's simply the process of simplification. And again, that's what we do in meditation, is we simplify our experience. We simply come into the direct moment and we try to stay in this moment without venturing into the past, venturing into the future. We simplify our experience. But we can also simplify our lives. The less stuff we have, the less appointments we have in our calendar, the less multitasking that we do, the more simple our experience will be. And most people find that to be satisfactory, to be a source of happiness. The opposite of that, of course, being the more we complicate our lives, the more crazy things we get, the more overwhelmed we get, the less happy we are. And the third definition of renunciation, from a Buddhist point of view, it's one that I really love, is renunciation is giving up what gets in the way of happiness. Simply giving up what gets in the way of happiness. And that might include all kinds of stuff, but that might include your addictions, our addictions. We all have addictions. It might be busyness, it might be our phone, it might be checking the New York Times, it might be the traditional substance abuse. We all have addictions. Spiritual practice, if it's not done mindfully, can be an addiction. So renunciation can be giving up what gets in the way of happiness. And that means we need to recognize what's getting in the way of our happiness. And sometimes it's the very things we're doing to try to make ourselves happy. I just need to make more money, or I just need more stuff, or I need to date more, or I need to get laid more. You know, is that really bringing us happiness, or is that getting in the way of happiness? It requires a little discernment, a little investigation. So our consumer culture is giving us exactly the opposite message from renunciation. Our consumer culture, we just get barraged with ads saying you need this to be happy, you need more stuff, you need more experiences, you need to take a vacation in Hawaii, you need. And then we want. That's what our culture is all about, is wanting. Buddha said wanting is craving. And craving is the second noble truth. Craving is the source, simply the source of unhappiness and stress. Third noble truth is that letting go of craving is the source of happiness. So again, renunciation is a third noble truth. Central principle to Buddha's practice, whether in meditation or whether in daily life. The Buddha actually had a summary of what we actually need. And it's the only thing as monks are allowed to have. Food, clothing, shelter, and medicine. You don't need anything else if you have those things. That's what we need. Food, shelter, medicine, and clothing. There's a lot of other stuff we want, but that's what we need. So renunciation is not so much about less stuff. It's about less wanting, less craving. Lassiter, who is a Theravada monk and wrote a wonderful book on the Paramitas, said, meditation is the practice of renunciation. It's turning the mind away from its dreams and back towards its source. So the third of the parami that I'm going to talk about this morning is generosity, or dana. And I took, dana is actually the first on the list of all the paramis. The traditional Theravada list of paramis, dana is number one. That's the first thing that the Buddha talked about very often when he addressed lay people or people that didn't know his teachings. And the reason I'm putting it at the end this morning is because I want to get the dana talk, GBF, and this is it. Think about the dana talk that we hear every week. It's kind of uncomfortable, right? It's not easy for whoever's leading the group to say, okay, well, now I have to give the dana talk. And the rest of us say, okay, I know what this is about. This is where they ask for money. Well, neither one of those is dana. Dana is generosity. So it's the generosity talk. And generosity is about relationship. So think about how you feel when you receive a gift. It feels good. And think about how you feel when you give a gift, when you find just the perfect thing for a person. And maybe not for a holiday or a birthday or something like that, but you find something and you think, oh, this is something that person would really like. Yesterday, when I was at the farmer's market with my friend, they had organic walnuts. And he was meeting his wife at this retreat, and he said, oh, my wife really likes walnuts. He says, it would make her very happy if I bought some organic walnuts. And I could just see it was an act of joy that he like it was an act of joy for me to find my morel mushrooms. It was an act of joy for him to find walnuts. But in his case, it was joyful because this was something he could give to someone that he knew was going to be meaningful and appreciated. So it's important to notice how you feel when you receive gifts and when you give gifts. Dana is about the warmth of creating a benevolent connection. It's about benevolence. It's not what one gives that's significant, but the act of giving, which opens the heart in a benevolent way. So dana, ideally and hopefully, in Buddha's practice, and I hope, if nothing else, I say this morning that this sticks with you. Dana should be about opening your heart. It It should be a heart-opening, loving expression. And that opening of the heart affects the other person accordingly. I told you how my friend was buying the walnuts. I was also there when he gave them to his wife. Oh, sweetie. What a really sweet thing. You thought of me. You brought me walnuts. It's a beautiful thing. When you receive a gift, you know that you're being loved and acknowledged. When you give a gift, whether it's somebody you know or to an organization that you want to support, that you might not know so much, it's an opening of the heart. It's an act of love. Dana is an act of love. In both cases, again, you are the beneficiary. It's not just about, obviously, material things. Dana can be about lending a helping hand. It could be service, volunteerism, giving a smile to a homeless person. Maybe you don't have $1 to give a homeless person that's sitting on the street with a cup, but you can make eye contact. You can smile. You can say, I know you're here. I acknowledge you. Dana creates community and gives us the feeling of being part of something meaningful and sacred. It's connection. And that's what I really feel here in Sangha, is even before the Dana talk. That's what I felt when I walked into Sangha this morning, is I felt connection with this beautiful community of spiritual seekers that have come together this morning. You're simply showing up this morning as an act of Dana. Because I know I benefit from sitting in silence with you. Dana is engaged Buddhism. You've heard talks about engaged Buddhism. It includes our activism, our service, our support for political, social, spiritual communities, our efforts to propagate peace and justice and equality for all people. That's all Dana. That's all generosity. Generosity is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So at GBF we have a lot of activities. We support the Larkin Street Youth Project. We correspond with incarcerated inmates. We support other organizations and causes, as well as each other. So when we give the Dana talk, it's not just about memorials, about monetary support, but it's also about those of us that volunteer. It's a huge gift of Dana. And if you can't offer material support to your community, this community or other communities, there's other ways of offering Dana. Being generous with your time, generous with your abilities. The thing I love about the Dana way of supporting the Dharma is that it's not fee-for-service based. It's not capitalistic. It's really a fairly radical way of keeping organizations going. And this organization of Buddhism, if it is an organization, this is the way it's always been kept going from the time of the Buddha. So it's a revolutionary alternative to capitalism, Dana. Dana can also be seen as paying it forward. If you think about it, the reason we're here, what allows us to be here this morning, is Dana that's been offered by the people that came before. The people on the steering committee that run Gay Buddhist Fellowship, the people that own and rent this building, that allow it to be a Dharma center and allow us to have the space on Sunday mornings. The teachers that offer their teachings, the volunteers that make this organization run, and all the people that have given in many ways with time and money in the past make it possible for us to sit here right now in this present moment this morning. And likewise, the fact that we're coming together in the way we are this morning, right now in this present moment, we're creating the conditions that's going to make it possible for this Sangha to continue next week and 5 years from now and 20 years from now. So we're paying it forward. We're the beneficiaries of the people that came before us. And now might be a good moment to just take take a moment to remember the people that came before us that are no longer with us, that offered the dana of their presence and their monetary support and their volunteerism to make GBF today possible. Just take a moment and remember maybe one person that you know is no longer with us that wanted GBF to be a force in their life, in your life. And then take another moment and imagine somebody that's never been here yet, that's yet to come. And we're here today. One of the important things we're doing this morning is creating the causes and the conditions for that future member of GBF, or members. It's a beautiful thing to reflect on. We're giving birth to GBF just by being here this morning. So one last word on generosity. Again, this is from Ajahn Sucitto. The cultivation of generosity is about bringing people to mind and sharing the goodness of one's life with them. It means developing a sharing intent, and from there, learning to see one's life as part of a whole system, rather than as an isolated individual fragment thrown together in a haphazard way. We're all connected. And our practices of virtue and generosity and renunciation are all meant to foster that connection. So I will thank you for the generosity of your attention and for joining me in silence and for the Dharma talk this morning. And with that, we have a few minutes, not a whole lot many, but if anybody has a comment or a question, a reflection, I'd like to hear it. Oswaldo.
Thank you, David. This is, I really was taken in by the last things you were saying about Dana and the people that were here before that made today possible, and what we could do for future people that might not even know about this group and its benefits this time ago. So that was what a wonderful thing. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I love that reflection and do it often, and you can carry it all the way back to the time of the Buddha. The Dharma has always been freely given, and it's always been supported by the dana of the community, and that system has worked for 2,500 years.
It also reminded me of a book, an author I've read several of his books, David K. Reynolds. I don't know if anybody here recognizes. He's not explicitly Buddhist, but more like a psychotherapy. But one of the things that he uses for his practice is the Japanese psychotherapist by name Morita, and his technique was one of his therapies was to have people lie in bed for several days, where he would come visit, and he would ask them to meditate, reflect on everything positive that people have made on his behalf, starting with his mother, at birth, all the way through, and he would just, the therapist would come in and quiz them on it. So it was an extended meditation period of the session, extended for several days, where the person reviewed the life from a particular angle. It's just, what have people done for me?
Beautiful.
That allowed me to be for him. And
gratitude ought to be one of the paramitas, and I don't know why it's not, but I think it's kind of subsumed by several of them. But gratitude fits with the list, doesn't it?
Thank you, David. Another wonderful talk. I was struck
when I considered the subject as it was announced as perfections, when I heard you begin to talk, I was struck by the notion of how much space there was in which to practice these, and the notion that you don't have to be perfect. There's lots of room and forgiveness for a range of intention to practice perfections. Just as very, very few of us will encounter that complete enlightenment that some people hold up as the highest achievement in our practice. Few of us will be entirely perfect in any of these practices. But the notion of that space that kind of allows for one to keep intending and keep practicing was comforting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We can't be, and we probably never will be perfect. I'm just rephrasing. We can't be perfect, and yet we can practice the perfections. And we might not in this lifetime be totally and fully enlightened, but we can be awake in any moment. It's one of the wonderful things about this practice.
Question, David.
Yeah.
So I was reflecting and wondering, what is it about, why do we have such resistance here, maybe in the West, the U.S., but in the current culture, society, such resistance to renunciation? It seems almost as if it's sometimes seen as a blow against our identity, that we have to, we can't have, that we have to give something up. I saw this piece in the news recently about this thing called rolling coal. Has anybody heard of this? So rolling coal is when you take your big truck, your big pickup truck that runs on diesel, and for like $500 you can modify the exhaust system so that when you punch it, it just billows out black smoke onto a pedestrian, a bicyclist, or a Prius that's next to you. And people even put on the back of their truck Prius repellent and stuff like this, because it's seen as well, you're all about doing without by driving your Prius, and I'm going to resist against that by going into excess to counteract, and it just started why do people feel like it's an attack on them so it's all about, renunciation, giving something up is so difficult. It's, I don't know if it's just part of our culture or consumerism or what.
I do think it's part of our culture, and it's not everybody in our culture. I mean, the Quakers are famous renunciates, and the hippies were. But our entire culture is, what you're describing, that is so offensive, but what it says to me is that that's about people that are very disconnected from other people and are saying, and fairly egocentric, and saying, I can do whatever I want, whenever I want to do it, and I'm going to do it in your face. But in order to reinforce that, I'm different than you, that, we're not connected.
You go to Arizona too often, Tom.
No,
I have never heard
I've never
that.
seen it there.
I think there was an article about it in the New York Times. I remember it was a picture of a big truck with this big black cloud coming out of the smokestack. It was I just looked at it. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. Amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty.
I don't know. Does anybody else have thoughts on that? About the why of our culture? We could talk for hours about it, I'm sure.
I'm not sure. I was just thinking about that too. I think it's there's this idea in a culture that abundance there's so much abundance of everything, of food, of the size of your home, the size of your car. Everything is large and extra big, and that's, I think, an important value in our culture.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people come here from places where they have less, and then the dream is to have more and to collect.
Yeah.
I think it kind of goes against our American identity to go back to having without, because it's kind of like going backwards, like
Yeah.
to what we left or what our ancestors left, or
I think that's very wise. Yeah. I think so. And I think we often don't see how the rest of the world see this. Poor countries and poorer people and less developed countries see American excess as something that's fairly offensive from their point of view.
I'm sure it's like what kind of if you travel, people will make fun of that aspect of American culture all over the world. They kind of make a lot of stereotypical observations and generalizations about what Americans are like based on this idea of excess.
Yeah.
And like you'll hear that in the comments, if you're at the dinner table and you're the only American, you'll hear there's this general it's kind of almost like humorous to see some of our excesses.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Yes.
Sometimes I'm in and thanks for your talk, but sometimes I'm in a group like this, and I'm thinking, okay, what is my life like 95% of the time when I'm out in the world there? And I'm thinking, okay, renunciation, well, I do like getting things. I do like getting praise. I do like having relationships. What I'm not so good at is losing them or not getting what I want. So I don't think in my life I'm not going to still have some desire or needs to have more or live in a comfortable place or have a boyfriend. But I guess what I work on is not being, so attached to things that when they don't go my way, I don't fall over or go into despair.
Yeah, well, as the great Dharma masters, the Rolling Stones say, you can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need. It's not everything or nothing. It's like, maybe what we have, we can just, it's as simple as being grateful for what we have and just put our wanting on the back burner for a moment. And sometimes it's as simple as, is it do you get pleasure from coming to a gay Buddhist fellowship and closing your eyes and meditating and being silent for a half an hour? That's enough renunciation in the morning.
David, I think that's all we have time for.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your service. Next week, our speaker will be Gary Ost, who's also a member of our Sangha. Gary is a retired Episcopal priest. He began his study of the Dharma in 2008 with the Shambhala School of Tibetan Buddhism. He's gone on from there, and he has taken informal bodhisattva vows. He studied the Lojong teachings, and out of those teachings, he's currently exploring the transformative psychological effect of Tonglen, a personalized mantra practice accompanied by taking in and sending out the breath, and he'd like to share some of the benefits of his practice with us next week. So, Donna, there's a bowl out there. Please be generous. Any other announcements? Jim?
Yes, my name is Jim. I'm your host. I will be going around with the Donna bowl. Feel generous. There are some treats out there, some fruit. There's some little Easter candy. And there's hot water for tea. If you use a cup, please put it in the sink and I'll clean it up. There's a sign-up sheet on this cadenza over here if you want to sign up to our mailing list. And people who would like to go to lunch assemble at the door around 12:30. I think that's it. Have a wonderful day.
Any other announcements? Excellent. Why don't we gather in a circle for our dedication of merit?
Oh, I have a recommendation.
Do you know?
Yep. tonight at 10 o'clock, they're starting a series called Wolf Hall, based on two absolutely brilliant books. And it's supposed to be thrilling.
On
PBS.
PBS.
Right.
Thank you. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.